Have you ever checked your credit card balance and know the number is going to be bad, but you look anyway and it's somehow worse than you expected? Not because you went on some crazy spending spree. Not because you bought anything irresponsible. Just regular stuff: gas, groceries, a few meals when you didn't have time to cook, a doctor's visit, a car repair that couldn't wait. Normal life expenses that somehow added up to a number that makes your stomach drop. And the really unsettling part is that you're not alone. Not even close. Right now, tens of millions of Americans are doing exactly the same thing. Using credit cards not for vacations or luxury purchases or things they don't need, but just to get through the month. Just to cover the basics. Just to survive. Welcome back to the Money Channel. Today we're going to talk about what's actually happening with credit card debt in America right now. Why so many people are leaning on plastic just to keep the lights on, what it's actually costing them, and where this whole thing is heading if nothing changes. Hit subscribe if you want to keep seeing the financial reality that most media glosses over. Let's get into it. Let's start with the numbers. What is the actual scale of what we're dealing with, because the numbers are genuinely staggering once you see them all together. Total credit card debt in the United States just crossed $1.17 trillion. Trillion with a T. That's a record high. Higher than it has ever been in American history. And it didn't get there because Americans suddenly became irresponsible or financially reckless. It got there because the math of everyday life stopped working for a huge portion of the population, and credit cards became the gap filler. The average American household carrying credit card debt is now sitting on roughly $10,000 in balances. $10,000 at an average interest rate of around 21%. Let that sink in for a second. 21%. That's not a fringe rate for people with bad credit. That's the average rate across the board right now. The Federal Reserve's rate hiking cycle pushed credit card interest rates to the highest levels in modern history, and they have barely come down. At 21% interest, that $10,000 balance costs roughly $2,100 a year just in interest alone. Just for the privilege of carrying the balance. Not paying it down. Not making progress. Just existing in debt costs $2,100 a year. That's $175 a month going directly to the credit card company, doing absolutely nothing for the person paying it. And delinquency rates are climbing. The share of credit card balances that are 90 or more days past due has risen to levels not seen since the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. Which tells you something important. This isn't just people carrying debt they can manage. A growing number of people can't make the minimum payments anymore. So how did we get here? Why this is happening? Because this didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't random. There's a very specific sequence of events that pushed millions of ordinary people into credit card dependency, and understanding that sequence matters. Start with inflation. Between 2021 and 2023, prices on everyday essentials went up dramatically. Groceries up 25%. Rent up 30% in many markets. Gas swinging wildly. Car insurance up nearly 40%. Utilities higher. Healthcare higher. Everything that people have to buy regardless of what it costs went up significantly, and it went up fast. Now, wages did go up during this period too. That's true. But here's the thing that gets glossed over constantly. Wage increases were uneven. People at the top of the income scale saw the biggest gains. People in the middle and bottom, the people already living closest to the edge, saw smaller increases that in many cases didn't keep pace with the specific categories of inflation that hit them the hardest. Your rent going up $400 a month hurts a lot more if your raise was $200 a month. So the gap opened up. Monthly expenses started exceeding monthly income for a growing number of households. And when that happens, you have basically three options. You cut spending, you dip into savings, or you put it on the cards. Cutting spending sounds simple until you realize how little discretionary spending many of these households had to begin with. When you're already not taking vacations, already not eating out regularly, already driving an old car and skipping the gym, there's not much left to cut. The expenses that went up were the non-negotiable ones. Savings got depleted first. The pandemic-era savings buffer that a lot of households built up stimulus checks, reduced spending during lockdowns, that money is largely gone now. The San Francisco Fed estimated that excess pandemic savings were fully exhausted for most lower and middle-income households by mid-2023. So the cushion disappeared right around the same time that inflation was still running hot and interest rates were at their peak. So the card came out. Not as a choice exactly. More like the only remaining options. So who is actually doing this? Let's be really clear about this, because there's a narrative that gets pushed that credit card debt is a discipline problem. That people carrying balances just need to stop buying things they don't need. And for a small slice of cardholders that might be true. But that's not what's driving a $1 trillion record. Let me tell you about someone we'll call Jason. He's 34. He works in logistics, makes about $52,000 a year, which sounds reasonable until you account for where he lives. His rent is $1,650 a month. His car payment is $380 because his old car died 2 years ago, and he needed something reliable to get to work. Car insurance is $180. Health insurance through work takes another $240 out of his paycheck before he even sees it. Student loan is $290 a month. Utilities, phone, groceries, gas, another $800 conservatively. Add that up. That's $3,540 a month in fixed and semi-fixed expenses. Jason takes home about $3,600 a month after taxes and deductions. That leaves him $60. $60 for everything else. Every unexpected expense. Every car repair. Every medical copay. Every work expense. Every single thing that normal life requires. Jason is not buying designer clothes or taking exotic vacations. He is one flat tire away from putting groceries on a credit card. And a lot of months, that's exactly what happens. Not because he's irresponsible. Because the math genuinely doesn't work. There are millions of Jasons. The Federal Reserve's own survey of household finances found that roughly 37% of American adults would struggle to cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing or selling something. $400. That's a car repair. That's an emergency room copay. That's a broken appliance. And more than a third of the country can't cover it without going into debt. These are working people. People with jobs, with incomes, with budgets they actually try to stick to. The credit card isn't a symptom of carelessness. It's a symptom of a system where the cost of basic living has outpaced what regular jobs pay for a huge portion of the workforce. What the credit card companies know. Here's where it gets really important to understand, because the credit card industry is not a passive participant in this story. They are an active and very sophisticated one. Credit card companies make money in two primary ways. Interchange fees, the percentage they charge merchants every time you swipe, and interest. And interest is where the real money is. A customer who pays their balance in full every month is actually not that profitable for a credit card company. The real profit comes from the revolving balance customer. The person who carries a balance month to month and pays interest on it indefinitely. And the industry has spent decades engineering products, terms, and psychological triggers specifically designed to create and maintain revolving balance customers. The minimum payment is maybe the clearest example of this. On a $10,000 balance at 21% interest, the minimum payment might be around $250 a month. Sounds manageable. Except at that payment rate, it would take you over 30 years to pay off the balance, and you'd pay more than $18,000 in interest alone on top of the original $10,000. You'd pay almost 3 times what you borrowed with interest. The credit card company puts that minimum payment number in big bold print on your statement. The total interest you'll pay if you only make minimums is buried in small print in a corner of the statement that almost nobody reads. That's not an accident. That's a design choice. Then there's the reward system. Cashback points, miles. The entire rewards ecosystem is built to encourage spending and to make people feel like they're winning when they use the card. And for the roughly 40% of cardholders who pay their balance in full every month, the ones with enough financial cushion to never carry a balance, the rewards are genuinely beneficial. They're getting something for free. But those rewards don't come from nowhere. They are funded by the interest paid by the other 60% of cardholders who carry balances. The rewards program is essentially a wealth transfer, from lower-income revolving balance customers to higher-income full-pay customers, facilitated by the credit card company, which takes a cut of everything. The industry also knows that once someone is carrying a balance, the psychological barrier to adding more debt gets lower. You already owe $5,000. What's another $200? The incremental debt feels smaller against a larger existing balance. This is called debt normalization, and it's one of the reasons balances tend to grow rather than shrink once someone starts revolving. Let's talk about the interest rate trap. This is very important because most people genuinely don't understand how destructive 21% interest is at scale. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates 11 times between March 2022 and July 2023. The federal funds rate went from essentially 0 to over 5%. And credit card rates followed almost immediately and almost entirely. When the Fed raises rates, credit card companies raise their rates within weeks. When the Fed cuts rates, credit card companies lower their rates slowly, partially, and reluctantly. This asymmetry is not subtle and it's not accidental. It's a structural feature of how credit card pricing works, and it massively benefits the issuers at the expense of cardholders. The Fed has started cutting rates. Credit card rates have barely moved. The average rate that was around 16% before the hiking cycle is now sitting at 21%, even though the Fed funds rate has come down from its peak. Now think about what 21% means in practical terms for someone carrying $10,000. Every single month, $175 of their payment goes to interest before a single dollar touches the principal. If they can only afford to pay $300 a month, which is already a stretch for someone in Jason's financial situation, only $125 of that is actually reducing what they owe. At that rate, it takes years to make meaningful progress, and any unexpected expense that forces them to add to the balance resets the clock. This is why credit card debt is so much more destructive than other forms of debt. A mortgage at 6.5% is expensive but manageable. A car loan at 7% hurts, but it amortizes. Credit card debt at 21% is a completely different animal. It compounds aggressively against you. It grows faster than most people can pay it down. And because the minimum payment system makes it feel manageable in the short term, people often don't realize how deeply trapped they are until the balance has grown far beyond what they originally spent. The people carrying these balances are not getting ahead. They are running on a treadmill that is slowly speeding up. Every month they stay on it, the hole gets a little deeper. And the credit card company gets a little richer. So what happens next? Where this is heading? Because this isn't a stable situation. $1 trillion in credit card debt at 21% interest with rising delinquency rates is a pressure system building towards something. The optimistic scenario is that inflation continues to cool, the Fed cuts rates further, credit card rates eventually follow, wages keep growing, and over time the math gradually starts working better for the people who are currently stretched thin. The balances get manageable, delinquencies stabilize, and the system absorbs the stress without a major rupture. The pessimistic scenario is that a recession hits before any of that relief arrives. Unemployment rises. The people who are currently just barely covering their minimum payments on a full-time income suddenly can't cover them at all. Delinquencies spike. Charge-offs climb. And a consumer debt crisis compounds whatever economic downturn triggered it. The honest answer is nobody knows which scenario plays out. What we do know is that the current situation, where tens of millions of Americans using high-interest credit cards as a basic survival mechanism, is genuinely unsustainable at the individual level, even if the system as a whole absorbs it. Because here's what nobody talks about enough. Every dollar someone pays in credit card interest is a dollar that isn't going toward savings, toward investments, toward building any kind of financial buffer. The people carrying these balances are not just treading water financially. They are actively moving backwards. Their net worth is declining every month they carry the balance. The wealth gap between people who carry credit card debt and people who don't isn't just a snapshot. It's a diverging trajectory that gets wider every single month. The people who get out of this cycle early, those who find a way to stop the bleeding, pay down the balance, and break the dependency on revolving credit, are people who have a chance to redirect that $175 a month in interest payments towards something that actually builds their future. Invested over 30 years, that $175 a month becomes over $260,000 at a reasonable return. That's the difference between the debt trap and the wealth-building path. And it starts with understanding exactly what's happening and why. So here's where that leaves you. If you're carrying a credit card balance right now, you are not alone, and you are not failing. You are navigating a genuinely difficult financial environment where the cost of living has outpaced income for a huge portion of the workforce, and credit cards became the bridge that kept everything from falling apart. But understanding that it's not your fault doesn't make the interest rate go away. 21% is 21% regardless of how you got there. And every month you carry that balance, it costs you more than most people realize. If there is any way to attack the balance aggressively, cut something, pick up extra income, throw any windfall at it, do that first before anything else. The guaranteed 21% return you get from paying off credit card debt beats almost any investment you could make with that money instead. If the balance is large enough that minimum payments feel like the only option, then look into balance transfer cards with 0% introductory periods. Look into personal loans at lower rates to consolidate. Don't add more debts. You need to reduce the interest rate on existing debt so more of your payment goes toward the actual balance. And if you're not carrying a balance right now, you're one of the people paying in full every month. Don't let that change. The rewards are real. The trap is even more real. The only version of a credit card that works in your favor is one where you never pay a single dollar in interest. The moment you start carrying a balance, the entire equation flips, and the house always wins. The credit card is not the enemy. The interest rate is. And the system that keeps that rate at 21% while millions of people have no other option, that's worth being angry about. But anger doesn't pay down debts. Understanding does. Drop a like if this helped you see the full picture. Subscribe if you want to keep getting the real math on the financial systems shaping your life right now.